It's 1817. Lord Byron, living in exile, traveling throughout Europe, comes across a poem by an English poet named John Hookham Frere called The Monks and the Giants. It's written in a stanza form called Ottava Rima, or rhyme of eight. This is a very difficult stanza form for someone writing in English. Easier in Italian, and many Italian words end in vowels, and many Italian polysyllabic words rhyme with one another. Not many English words end in vowels, and it's difficult to rhyme polysyllabic words. Often you see in poems that rhyme in English monosyllabic words making most of the rhymes. So to write in Ottava Rima, even though you might use it seriously, as often Italian poets did, to write Ottava Rima in English is almost by definition to write comically, whether you intend it or not. And Byron found Frere's poem, even though it wasn't necessarily intended to be funny, hilarious. So he thought, I'll use Ottava Rima and write my own epic, a mock epic, an epic that is partially funny because it pushes epic conventions to such an extreme that they appear ridiculous. One of the many ways that the poem is funny then is through the way that Byron is using the rhyme in Ottava Rima, trying to translate that to English. Sometimes there are really ridiculous moments where polysyllabic words are made to rhyme. And one of the most, famous of these comic rhymes occurs in stanza 12, where the narrator, stanza 12, where the narrator says the following. This is at the end of the stanza. Now, another thing I should have mentioned is that the Ottava Rima requires it's three rhymes. It's an 8-line stanza, and the rhyme scheme is A B A B A B C C. So you have to find 3 A's that rhyme, 3 B's that rhyme, 2 C's that rhyme. That's very difficult in English. So listen to the comedy of stanza 12. Just paying attention to the rhyme. 'Tis pity learned virgins ever wed with persons of no sort of education, or gentlemen who, though well born and bred, grow tired of scientific conversation. I don't choose to say much upon this head. I'm a plain man, and in a single station. But oh, ye lords and ladies intellectual, inform us truly, have they not henpecked you all? So he's rhyming intellectual with henpecked you all. Now, certainly, this is not the most feminist sentiment. The narrator seems to have problems with women who have intellectual ambitions, probably based on Byron's own issues with his wife, Annabella Milbank, and her intellectual passions. So certainly the narrator casts himself not as a misogynist, but someone who, to use our language, would certainly have some sexist tendencies, and so that's showing up in this stanza. And we can talk about gender in our discussion of the poem, and we will. But what I'm focusing on here is more of a formal element, to rhyme intellectual with henpecked you all. So it's just ridiculous, and this shows up in other places as well. So pay attention as you go through the poem. Anytime you see a polysyllabic word at the end of a stanza, pay attention to the rhymes. So absurd polysyllabic rhyming shows up. That's one way that the rhyme is used for comic purposes. But another way is what I would call through deflation, where usually at the end of the stanza, the final couplet of the stanza, Byron will, in the penultimate line, say something rather noble or pompous or grand. And then in the last line, he'll undercut that sentiment, but he'll undercut it largely through the rhyme. That the first element of the couplet will suggest a kind of grandiosity, and the last element of the couplet will suggest a kind of deflation of that grandiosity. For instance, this is stanza 60. Among her numerous acquaintance, all selected for discretion and devotion, there was the Donna Julia, whom to call pretty were but to give a feeble notion of many charms in her as natural as sweetness to the flower or salt to ocean. her zone to Venus, or his bow to Cupid. But this last simile is trite and stupid. So he's using mythological allusion to talk about this character, Donna Julia, invoking Cupid and Venus, but then at the very end he says this last simile is trite and stupid, which suggests that this grand mythological allusion is silly, it's trite, it doesn't work. But also there's a sense that Donna Julia's whole persona, which is made of her invoking various forms of myth and intellect and religion itself, is kind of trite and stupid. So pay attention to that too. So there's just two ways that the rhyme works comically. Ridiculous polysyllabic pairings, but also pairings usually at the final couplet of the stanza where the rhyme shows a deflation of something grand into something silly.